Cabman's Shelter, Albert Bridge, SW3. Once upon a time there was more than 60 of them, but now fewer than a dozen of these large garden shed-like structures survive, each one still smart in its trademark green livery and dedicated to the cause of keeping cabbies from the bottle. The shelter's origins go back to 1874 when, attempting to hail a cab, Captain George Armstrong, late of the Indian Army and then managing editor of the Globe newspaper, found plenty of vacant vehicles on the stand, but not a single driver for hire. Cabmen at this time, perhaps unsurprisingly, had a well-deserved reputation for hard drinking. Thus, on the evening in question, Armstrong eventually discovered a gaggle of them sheltering from the weather in a local tavern, trading occupational banter and availing themselves to the establishment's more obvious delights. Together with several well-meaning philanthropists and propelled by typically Victorian good intentions, Captain Armstrong set out to devise a practical alternative to find somewhere able to provide the same shelter and companionship, as well as a cheap meal, but without the temptation of alcoholic liquor. Edinburgh and Birmingham apparently had something similar already. However, Armstrong was thinking bigger, wishing to provide not just stoves on which to cook, and tables and benches, but also a selection of books and newspapers to read. There were, however, to be strictures against discussing union business while inside. For their part, the Metropolitan Police decreed that, as the shelters were to occupy space on the Queen's Highway, each should no longer be larger than a horse and cab, and within a decade or so 40 of them had been installed at a cost of approximately £200 apiece. Maintained by the Cabin and Shelters Fund, which through the Transport and General Workers Union was eventually empowered to collect a small levy from each of the drivers, they were an immediate success. Indeed, by 1894 the Fund Secretary reported that the drivers were using them regularly and were extremely particular about their stakes, and everything of that kind, and are as ready to complain as members of West End clubs if things are not right. As they were permitted to serve only cabbies, the cub analogy was understandably particularly by the 1920s, when the H.V. Morton was telling the story of the Junior Turf, a cabman's shelter by Green Park which was ordered by Westminster Council either to desist from selling sausages to passers-by or to pay business rates like any other commercial catering outlet. Unsurprisingly, they opted for a return to their original exclusivity, although rumours persisted of white-tied toffs and even younger royals popping in for a late-night bite on their way home from the 43 or the Embassy. Rumours abounded, too, of the explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton, who, as one old cabby told Morton, used to bring down great books of photographs and talk all night about his travels. More recently, however, improvements to the roadways have done for many shelters, just as the Luftwaffe did for several of them in the 1940s, and what with other changes in the way taxi drivers work, their shifts around the capital, it seems unlikely the few remaining cabin shelters will survive much longer.